Hi, Jamie. Good to see you again.
Hi, good morning.
Really good to see you. My thoughts today, where are they going? I feel like we've talked about this quite a lot over our different sessions and our chats, but I'm thinking let's dive a little bit more into this because you've obviously written about a lot this week about literacy, about GLP writing, hyperlexia, and I feel that that's something that certainly I'm really interested in and often see this with the children that I'm working with as well. So let's dive into that today.
All right, where shall we begin?
Shall
Hyperlexia, GLP, autism, we're kind of all over the place.
How can we even unpick all of it? I mean, I think if we start at hyperlexia, where it begins, or the start, um, and then move along in terms of how that keeps shaping throughout life into adulthood and beyond. What do you think?
That's great. I am so disclaimer, I am not hyperlexic,
Hmm.
right? I was illiterate. I was on the other end of that spectrum. And I find it very fascinating, hyperlexia.
Mm,
Um, I suspect my daughter is hyperlexic. I'm a gestalt processor.
yeah.
Um, Over on Substack, a lot of uh, particularly women
Hmm.
in their late 40s through mid 50s that I interact with
Yeah.
identify now as gestalt processors, as autistic,
Yeah.
and as hyperlexic. And so they are documenting their view, and I really appreciated their insights on stuff that we share back and
Mm,
forth. Um, it's to me it's fascinating, but then kind of a pattern emerges in my head as it tends to,
mm,
where they're late diagnosed, right? Why are they late diagnosed? Well, they chatted to a friend. They were reading voraciously, so obviously, they're not. They made eye contact,
yeah.
so they're not autistic, and so they get diagnosed with all sorts of other things, throughout their 20s and 30s, and they get burned out and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then, at the end of that, then they discover perhaps, ADHD, autism, and so on. And then because gestalt processing is not really out there, it is for me, it is for you,
Yeah.
those that are in Marge's orbit and so on. But in the mainstream of autism discourse, is not there, is not found. Most people struggle. They trace the line from Canner to neurotribes to some influencer on TikTok or Instagram, and that's all they know. And they
Yeah.
don't know outside of that. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
And then maybe some of them stumble into a Substack, and the algorithm kind of defined myself and a few other people that are writing there who are, older Gestalt processors. And so I made a massive mistake. And as my mind tends to do, a kind of like, oh, I see a pattern here. And then I commented on it and I was wrong.
Mhm.
And very gently, kind of, the person's writing that I was commenting on kind of, accepted apology, and, we had a little conversation. But that's kind of where this comes from, this whole thing about, why our writing looks the way it does
Yeah.
as Gestalt processors. And so today it's kind of that, that hyperlexia. People are reading voraciously, and then you have gestalts that are being built inside of this library that they have in their head. you
Mm.
know they have amazing repertoire. And so are they writing for audience? Are they writing for genre? Are they writing,
Yeah.
so what does gestalt language look like in writing? It looks like what it needs to, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe we should just recap what hyperlexia is, I guess, because there are probably maybe there will be people that are listening for the first time and tuning in and may not be so familiar with the term hyperlexia. Um, but my understanding of hyperlexia is the ability um, to recognize symbols, to read without any formal teaching. And that, I guess, with maybe with adult GLPs, that could be, I guess, a foreign language, a language that is also maybe with unfamiliar letters or symbols as well. And I guess for myself working with young children, it's really interesting how, you know, parents, when they're bringing their children to see you, they, you know, they're bringing you because they're really worried, but they also want to show the
Right.
best of their child. So what's the first thing they tell me? Oh, he recognizes numbers up to 30. You know, this is a child who perhaps might be at this stage minimally speaking, because there's all sorts of things going on in his brain. And of course, not all children are, or anyone who is hyperlexic is a GLP, but for me, that can often be one of those signals that says, maybe we need to think differently about how this child might be acquiring language. And even like tiny
Yeah.
2, 3-year-olds are reading whole books that maybe have only been read to them once before, or another child reading the credits on a YouTube clip, or you know the subtitles, or reading you know signs as they're going past, you know, names that they've never seen before when they, you know, their parents are taking a different trip, and it's sort of thinking, okay, so I, I think your child might be hyperlexic. And then so then the other things that come along that might make us feel that they're a GLP start coming along as well. Sorry, I really took over that conversation.
Yes. No, I think it shows up in different comments here and there that,
Yeah.
maybe they don't know the name hyperlexia. Maybe they don't try to disassemble the hyper and the lexic and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Um, Myself, I learned to read and comprehend in my 30s, so I remember the process of learning proper reading.
Mm.
But most hyperlexics don't. Their memory does not go back that far, right? I was always reading, I taught myself, and then you have, some histories where like books were safer than people,
Yeah.
so like, oh, autism, right? It's no confusing, it's right there, and then you have those that spoke early, and were very conversational, very
Mm.
present, very, attuned, and they seem mature for their age, all of these types of things that you hear in people's story. I see it from a teaching standpoint where one of the first students that I had went back to the classroom after the pandemic, and here's this fourth grade boy, and he's sounding like a television news presenter as he's reading this passage. And the scoring says he's at the 11th or 12th grade level,
Yeah.
so the end of secondary school. He's in fourth grade. And then I asked him, like, okay, what did you read? What was that about? I don't know. You said to read it. You didn't say to understand it, right? It was amazing.
Yeah.
um so then we slowed down and asked him to kind of work on some comprehension, and he was able to. But when I asked him, like, do you remember when you started reading? And he said, no, I've always read.
Yeah.
Just what I do. Um,
And I think
that
yeah,
those are clues,
they
right?
are. And also like a huge strength. You know, when parent, like I said, when parents are bringing their child to see you and they're feeling anxious because perhaps their child is still, you know, minimally speaking, and you know, so they're very anxious, but they're then on the other hand, this child is recognizing patterns, is recognizing numbers, is recognizing whole sentences, can read, you know, the Gruffalo from start to finish. Um, and if
Right.
you know, start to read it yourself and you think, oh, you know, I'm a parent, I'm tired now, I'm going to skip a couple of pages. I am that parent that did that to my children. But you know, you can't get away with it because it is a whole, and that's what they want. They don't want you to skip a few pages because that disrupts that rhythm, that pattern, that recognition of something that, feels good to them as well.
Yes. And, on the bad side of it, it conspires against diagnosis of autism because you have
Mm,
access to words. You have, an amazing reference library for scrapes and stuff. And oftentimes, you are quite bright, you know,
yeah.
exceptional, whatever you want to call it. Um, and so I think it's a funny thing that I see here is that you have this kind of personality type that you're very bright, you are already well read, and so you want to show off a bit. You're like, yeah, I want to tell you about all these things.
Yeah.
And then the clinician says, well, then, yeah, you're having a very reasonable conversation, you're maintaining eye contact, you have enthusiasm, the reciprocity is there. So no, you're not autistic.
No. And I think
And
it's,
that's unfortunate.
yeah. And I guess this is, why we see many adults being diagnosed so late as well. And I guess maybe that sort of like the slightly tenuous link, but moves into adult writing and gestalt language processors who are adults who, and what that writing looks like as well, thinking about your own writing um, and things that have supported you with that along the way.
I think also about like the year between No Place for Autism and holistic language instruction, and that, I had been diagnosed for a while, and they gave me language, the clinical language around things. Their words for my experience was nonverbal autism,
Mm,
right? Okay. And so I just carried that with me. And I was trying to understand something. And in No Place for Autism, I kind of explain, you know, very crudely my experience of like this
mm,
interaction and language and stuff. Especially around questions I wasn't expecting. And so I explain it one way, and then I'm not comfortable with it, but it's there.
mm,
And I'm not going to go back and revise it and, do a second edition or something like that, because I think it's a good relic. But all through that experience, I never heard about Gestalt processing, right? I never heard about Marge and the whole legacy, the 100 years of it. I never heard about anything about Gestalt. And I kind of stumbled on it because I was trying to put together an IEP for a student that I very much like. I'm looking in the mirror at this student, but I'm struggling to kind of describe because their eligibility was specific learning disability, not autism. She happened to be a Mexican female. And so, kind of like the understudied of the understudied, right? So there wasn't a lot of clinical stuff. And I just kind of randomly happened into, Marge's book. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like things are popping and, all of that. And everything just kind of fell into place. I started working with her not from a speech therapist standpoint, but from a literacy standpoint.
yeah.
And, from her kind of ninth grade experience, semi-literate in any language, Spanish being her primary.
Hmm.
Um, but now she's going to college. So, and she will be successful. She graduated from high school, she passed her exam, she's going to college, all that stuff.
But
But
then
I think
so,
about from the standpoint, nobody's talking about like everything's in silos. You're in speech, I'm in literacy and
yeah.
high school maths and that kind of stuff. And the naysayers are trying to draw a fence around you and say you cannot do this. You have to do, arrow away. And it just seems so silly to me.
It does. But then I think, reflecting what you've just said about this young person who's, now graduated, is thank goodness that she had you as a teacher, because with your own lived experience, and then your knowledge from then sort of like finding Marge and all of the, you know, all of the history behind Gestalt language processing, you were able to support her in a way that didn't try to, in inverted commas, normalize her, like make her go down a pathway that she wouldn't have graduated, because actually that pathway isn't the pathway for her and her literacy development and her cognitive development and her thinking and her language, you know, all of it together. In the same way that, you know, these little ones that I'm seeing, the sort of preschool children under the age of 5, why are they needing to go through phonics? Because that's not how they're learning literacy. It might be at some point that they might need a little bit of phonics, because as they, you know, develop, they might need some additional cues to help them with perhaps unfamiliar words. Maybe, but maybe not. But why are we making them trying to normalize everybody to fit into this box? This is how we do it. Anyway, we'll get on to the all the political views around why they have to do it. But yeah, I just, as I listened to you talking about this young girl who you supported, and now she's got a college degree because of your recognition of her different style, and not a, you know, that was just how she learns. It's not the wrong, it's just different.
It's high school diploma. She's off to college,
Yeah.
right? So she's not graduated yet, and
Okay,
she's out of
sorry.
my care.
Yeah.
You know, she's an adult now.
Yeah.
Um, but I think about, you know, all of this stuff and kind of getting it back to writing. I
Mm,
see stuff on Facebook, and I want to jump in, and then I'm self-restrained, so I don't. But I think within the parent groups, there's a lot of kind of misunderstandings. Like some GLPs are hyperlexic, some GLPs are like me and have struggles with
mm,
massive struggles with literacy and language. And they kind of want to know, like, how to get, if you have me as a child, how do you get me to be hyperlexic like the neighbor's kid, right? And there's almost that kind of competition of it. Um, and if you can kind of think about, you know, what is each stage doing?
mm.
You know, thinking about, you know, from script garden to stage 6, what is the purpose of each stage? What is going on cognitively
Mm.
in these stages? And, you know, getting back to writing, it's really, really difficult to imagine a GLP writing academically in their school, whether it's, you know, primary school or secondary school, until they get to stage 6, because of
Yeah.
all of the mental processes that have to happen in order to put a sentence together, and then make a paragraph, and then make a 5-paragraph essay, and all of this stuff. And it's not a matter of scaffolds and you know, graphic organizers and this.
Mm.
It's the mental process of, I have the whole of it. I don't know how to break it into parts that
Yeah.
will be acceptable on the paper. And the process of breaking all of that into parts, you know, recombining them, mitigating them, stringing them together. Um, so when I produce a novel sentence, that is something in my script garden never existed before. It has never, right? I'm not taking Peppa Pig and Bluey and, you know, using a phrase, you know, from a Madness video or whatever. You know, as a whole, I am creating something, a gestalt that's never existed before. That's stage 6. It has to be stage 6. And so if I'm given an academic writing prompt, I'm creating this sentence that has never existed anywhere in my mind before. That's a stage 6 skill.
Mm.
And if we try to introduce it, you know, in skill development earlier, there's going to be a lot of struggle because we're just not there, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know how else other to explain it. I know end of this month, on the beginning of August, I have already written and ready to go and I shared with you titles.
Yeah.
But it is, kind of what is the purpose of each stage from
Yeah.
script garden to stage 6, and then some other things added onto that. But what are we doing? What's happening internally for each one of these stages? That is just so amazing. And so that's coming at the end of the month. And I also get into intonation and some really old studies. And this kind of ties into, that project that I've got on the side of diving into the old research to find, they've been talking about autism and they've been talking about gestalt language processing. They just haven't been naming it that way.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've been diving into kind of the research of it already, where, I find something from 1994 that is describing kind of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
But the researchers were looking at something else entirely. And it's around intonation. It's a population, South Asian, in London. These autistic kiddos sound more
Yeah.
like their nan than their mates, right? So why aren't they assimilating language?
Yeah.
Well, I think I know why, right? I think I might have a reason why. And so part of that kind of misreading or finding stuff in the old research is not just to prove the naysayers wrong, but to say that we have this massive data set of evidence
Mm.
that, you know, we can we can mine and we can reinterrogate this. Not to kind of redo the research, but just to say, here's a whole bunch of things that we might consider. And so kind of at the end of that run of the stages and stuff, I talk about intonation in relation to two papers, one from 94 and one from '05, that talk about this around autism and stuff. And they say all the things that we talk about with Gestalt processing, they just don't use the words. And what is it about intonation that, I don't want to assimilate my tongue. A lot of people don't. What the Peppa Pig effect, where you have American kiddos sounding British, and all of that stuff. So I talk about that at the beginning of August. But I think it's, one thing leads to another, and I, out of this writing, I'm asking myself, what is the purpose of this stage? What is it developing?
Yeah.
How do we, you don't push a button in your clinic and say, okay, Susie, now you're going on to stage 2. It just happens, right? And so what was satisfied in stage 1 that can facilitate stage 2? What is stage 2 doing? What is stage 3 doing? And why is it so different? And so I kind of walk through all of that stuff.
I like it.
And
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not super long dissertation pieces. They're very digestible. Um,
So when can
but yeah,
we,
it was
when's it going to be out, Jamie? What's the date?
the first one on the 26th, so 10 days. We got to get through all the writing and stuff. Um, so I'm on summer holiday, so I can't sit here and just bang away at stuff. But the whole of it came to me in a conversation with somebody else on a different topic entirely. A former student of mine, college level philosophy, and we were talking about Dharma. And so then I start to think about the Dharma of Gestalt language processing, the Dharma of each stage. And it really kind of helped me reframe, the whole thing. What
Yeah.
is stage 0? What does it uphold? What
Yeah.
is, Dharma means that which upholds. So what is this stage 1 Dharma? And so I tried to kind of reason through it, and they're not very long pieces. I wanted to keep them short on purpose, but that's kind of what happens in my head. It's like I'm having a conversation with you about something, and now I'm talking about, this other person, and yes, that's how it happens.
Well, I know that everyone is going to be really looking forward to reading the Dharma posts. Is that what we call them? Our essays? Will they be? They'll be published in Substack.
Yes, they're
Yeah.
outside pieces. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the outside pieces, and yeah, feels like that will definitely be another one that we'll be having a conversation about in the next few weeks. So
Oh, but I did want to treat the writing thing um, properly, and so
yeah,
there's more to come there. Um, and as I usually do, I have this whole of it, and I'm trying to figure out like Do I do the typical autistic deep dive and just write these massive pieces? Or do I try to break it apart and, okay, so what are the parts? And it takes a bit of time to kind of figure out where all the parts land. And then sometimes, like, I've done all the parts, and then I think, oh crap, Jamie, we should do a prologue and an epilogue. And sometimes I do a video with it, just depending on how I feel. But yes, I think this particular one, I'm very grateful to the person who inspired it, Jen McCrae, for her grace. And like, yeah, Jamie, you blew it. This is, you got this completely wrong. Okay, yeah, I don't want to just say sorry, Jen. I want to say what I've learned from it.
Yeah.
And not kind of self-flagellate or this, I made a mistake or whatever. But I think for me, that's always the process. Like, I'm constantly making mistakes. That's how I learn. I screw things
Yeah.
up. I figure, okay, that's not how to do it. Let me do it this way instead. And I was mentoring a teacher last year, kind of on the side, and I was explaining that nothing about my job, a resource specialist program teacher, is written down. It's all just kind of ad hoc. And so I would learn, especially like the management software and all that stuff, I would learn
Mm.
by doing things wrong the first time. Okay, can I do it that way? Now I go on to the next time. But yes, it has been quite a summer holiday.
Yes. Well, we shall look forward to reading those. I feels like that feels a good time to pause for today, and
Aye.
yeah, really looking forward to the Dharma chapters, and the first one you set out on the 26th of July.
26, 27, something like that. Aye.
Okay, so just over, yeah, a week's time. Fantastic.
Aye.
Can't wait. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you again.
It's great to see you as always.